Hi folks! Today I'm going to run through the 10 books that I recently read and rank them mercilessly in reverse order. Propping up the stack at number 10 we have Darwinia by Robert Charles Wilson. The opening premise is quite startling and it's worth reading for that alone, I think. In 1912, Europe disappears overnight, as if by magic, all of it. People, animals, plants, cities, the lot. In its place a strange flora and fauna, many of them hostile. I enjoyed the exploration elements of this story, but wasn't so keen on the much broader galactic scale plot elements that Wilson introduces about halfway through. Still, a solid book, and I really want to read Spin by the same author. At number 9 is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I like the way Keyes used the written words of the protagonist to give colour to his transformation. The parabolic plot, the rise, brief zenith and then crash back to earth was fun, if tragic, to read. Keyes spends time contrasting raw intelligence with emotional intelligence, although it probably wasn't called that back in the day. Charlie gets smarter and smarter, but is no more able to handle human relationships than he was previously. He's still stunted in that area. This was not an especially uplifting novel, but it is a classic and I enjoyed it for what it is. A very human story of jealousy, broken relationships, disappointment and loneliness. It's cheery stuff. By the way, a welcome to Sci-Fi Scavenger, especially if this is your first time. At number 8 is Cold Water by Dave Hutchinson. I think this is the weakest, or rather the least strong, of his Fractured Europe series. I like the glimpses of a future Europe, and in common with the other books, I like that the setting was primarily in Central or Eastern Europe. There's some cool tech, a lot of intrigue and spying, and a parallel universe or two to boot. There are 4 plot threads on different timelines which do eventually coalesce, but I struggled a little to keep it all straight in my head. But then I am easily confused. Places in the Darkness by Chris Brookmyre is at number 7. A detective story at its heart, with an odd couple pairing of straight-laced Alice Blake and slobby, corrupt Nicky the Fix. I've read a couple of his other books and they are definitely not science fiction, but Brookmyre jumps the genre boundary by setting this one on a giant orbiting space station. There's a space elevator, neural mesh tech and other science fiction standards, but really it's a conspiracy-busting whodunit that happens to be set in a science fiction setting. I should say at this point that I enjoyed all these books to varying degrees. There are no books that suck on this list. Having said that, perhaps the most disappointing book in this group is Lords of Uncreation by Adrian Tchaikovsky. When I say disappointing, it just wasn't as awesome as I wanted it to be. My high expectations were not fully met. The first third of the book is just a bit boring. The main character is a right whinge bag and it didn't really rev up until the final act. There were high points. I really like a couple of the characters, and it ultimately does sew up the Final Architecture trilogy in a satisfying way. I do think that it's the least good book of the 3. Before we hit the top 5, a quick welfare check. How are we doing? Have you read any of these books I've run through so far? Do you disagree with my views? Drop me a comment and why not give the like button a little tickle while you're at it. Okay, so into the top 5, where there is very little to separate what are all really excellent books. At number 5 is The Long Tomorrow by Lee Burchett. Set about a century after a devastating nuclear war has destroyed the cities, the story follows 2 cousins as they dream of escaping their strictly controlled agrarian lifestyle. Religion took hold pretty firmly post-war. In a nice touch, Burchett predicts that those who lived most simply before the war, the Mennonites for example, were best able to survive the aftermath and ultimately prosper. There are already fairly strict rules for living are added to with rules about how communities are formed, the maximum number of people in them, and buildings. Technology is an absolute no-no, but teenage boys are a curious bunch, and the cousins can't resist trying to learn more. They eventually run away, seeking a mystical place, Barterstown, where the flame of science and technology is said to be kept alight. The final 2/3 of the story covers their trek, mishaps and dangers along the way, and ultimately their differing reactions when they reach Barterstown. I really loved her writing style, and I've since picked up a couple more of her books that I really look forward to reading. Emma Newman's Planetfall is in at 4. Religion at play again, this time more like a personality cult. The leader had a vision which told her the location of God. Enough people were persuaded of this that they raised the cash to build a starship and made the arduous interstellar journey. But that's all in the past. The colony is well established, and we have an interesting protagonist in Ren, a 3D printer technician, who conceals 2 things. A colony-threatening truth about the nature of the God that they all went to find, and secondly, the extent of her own mental health battles. I thought Ren was a highly unusual lead character. I thought that Newman did an excellent job with the world building, particularly the alien nature of the nearby God City. There are 3 other books set in the same universe, although I understand that they're only loosely connected. I'll definitely be reading those too. I should also say that I've reviewed all of these books in more depth on the channel, and you can find them in my reviews playlist. So, into the top 3. In bronze medal position is A Time of Changes by Robert Silverberg, or Robert Silvertongue as I now think of him. His writing is beautiful. In the opening couple of chapters of the book, he conjures an image of a strange world peopled by the descendants of a human colonisation 1,000 years previously. There are great societal taboos associated with sharing inner thoughts, even to the extent of avoiding using the words I or me in a sentence. Our protagonist, Kinel Daraval, is the son of an important regional governor, who meets an Earthman who seeks inner enlightenment. Together they experiment with a drug that enables them to share their minds with another person, to truly know each other. This is a transformational experience for Kinel, and he takes it upon himself to take this to the masses, with grave consequences for him as the establishment closes in. This was my first Silverberg, but won't be my last. I've since acquired 6 or 7 others, which I'm really keen to read. Taking the second spot is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. I only recently finished this book, and I'm still processing elements of the story. Haldeman plays with time dilation to write a very human story of the traumas of war and the discontinuity inherent in returning home from hostilities to find things have changed on the home front. There is a nice millennium-spanning love story at the heart of the book, gravely threatened by the lovers being assigned to different missions with different time dilation effects. I love this book. So those are my recent reads ranked, or nearly. We've still got number 1 to go. What do you think so far? Drop me a note in the comments, and if this is the type of science fiction shtick that you like, then why not subscribe to my channel? Top of the pops this time around then is A Fire Upon the Deep by Vernor Vinge. He's in good company in this list. Many of the authors in these recent reads were unknown to me just a matter of months ago. Given that my liking for a good space opera, I can't fathom how I can have not come across Vinge or A Fire Upon the Deep before now. Anyhow, I loved how Vinge contrasts the epic galaxy-spanning peril of the Blight with the very small-scale peril of one family and their encounter with telepathic, doggish aliens after their ship crash lands. I thought the descriptions of the competing alien factions was terrific, and the limitations and advantages of their evolutionary path were well described. His concept of galactic zones of thought is also fabulous. The further from the core that you get, the more technological progress is possible, including faster-than-light travel and true artificial intelligence. There's even kind of weather at the zone boundaries, which can result in a boundary shift, sometimes for light years, sometimes short-lived, and sometimes not, which could trap an entire species, rendering their tech inoperable. There are several great concepts in this book, all threaded together in a real page-turner. I loved it, and I really must get stuck into the prequel, A Deepness in the Sky. That's my 10 recent reads ranked. Hope to see you again soon, but bye for now.